how have intergenerational leadership transitions influenced the way inclusion is approached in your companies?
I think it's a good start for very relevant to our company. As many people know, we are a very old family-owned business. We trace our origins back to the early 1900s in Colombo. And I'm actually the fourth generation in our family that's involved in the management of our business. And looking at this question specifically, we've had, I would say, two key intergenerational successions or transitions. Most recently from the third generation, now completely to the fourth generation of family involvement in the management and in the board. And I think from my experience, one of the key factors that supported this transition was the fact that the generation above us, above me and my generation, was very adamant that they wanted to retire at a certain age and completely step away from a day-to-day business role. I look at my father and two of my uncles. At the age of 60, they tried to do it. We didn't let them. We made them stay a couple more years. But at 62, my father literally resigned from his directorships, packed up his office, and walked out of the office and said, "Give it to somebody else." And that was an amazing step that he took, because at the time we didn't realize it, but he set an example not just for the family but for all the professionals in the company, who some of them who had been very successful professionals, who'd been with us for 30-35 years, that they also would accept that times have to change and we would need to eventually give others a chance and retire. So I think that was a key point I wanted to mention on this topic. And in terms of how it influences inclusion, I think the example I gave, it allows others to have that chance and see that there's not a ceiling for where you can achieve or what you can achieve in your career.
So our company is a bit younger, and I said 3 generations, but really the first transition of intergenerational leadership is kind of in progress, I guess. And for us, that's what it is. It's a progression. We have a lot of transitional activities constantly happening, and I think if I look at our experience, time has also been important for people to adjust to new roles and to give space for others. And our board has been very supportive in this. And it's a journey that I see that is ongoing. And inclusion. I mean, so being a family business, and I'm the eldest grandchild, and being involved, being the first to being involved in the business, I guess that kind of, I transitioned into that leadership. It was almost expected, right. So to speak. And there's no issue of what gender you are or whatever. It just happened.
Yeah, I like that you said it's a journey, because there's definitely not an end to it. It's constantly evolving, and how you manage it.
Perpetual.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say.
Okay. What implicit rules of leadership have you observed in your industries, and how have they been shaped by tradition and gender?
Oh gosh, rules of leadership. I hate when people define things, because I don't think anything is black and white. But if I look at the food industry in Sri Lanka in a broader sense, I believe a lot of the larger industries are quite hierarchical. They do stem, and they've had many years. The organizations are quite old, but you also get very dynamic young entrepreneurs starting out their businesses, which, I think they break all the rules of traditional leadership. So when it comes to gender in particular, I think again, being a manufacturing-based industry, in the operational side, we're yet to see more women take leadership. We had our first, operational head in the factory, but it actually took a lot of coaxing for her to actually take the role. But we only had one, whereas in marketing and finance, HR, you get a lot larger pool of people willing to take on leadership role. And I think, it's not about tradition. We talk about gender and having more inclusivity, but we also need a bigger pool of people applying to these roles, which I think organizations like ours probably have to facilitate, as does chambers and educational institutions.
Yeah, I think I can definitely relate to that. In the apparel industry, similar, manufacturing has traditionally been male-dominated in terms of the management, but it's a very labor-intensive industry, and the majority of the workforce tends to be female, right? The entry-level workforce, and that's how it's been for years. I think there's a valid reason for that, just because females are able to better operate the machines and handle the materials. That's something we've seen over the years. Not necessarily that men can't do it, but just the training and the skill level seems to be easier coming when a female is doing those operations. But in terms of rules, historically, you would never see a female being the operations manager or general manager of a factory. We also have examples in our company where we do now have females, and we're very happy to see it. I think it's still male dominated. In the HR, finance, marketing, sales positions, definitely much more balanced. But we try to encourage it by giving people the opportunity. I think there is a certain reluctance just because of cultural issues here in Sri Lanka as well. But we are seeing the rules bending and changing, and it's great for the industry.
I think for women sometimes to take more leadership positions, you're right. It's a cultural, social, but there's so much expectations, and when you have children, the dynamics become even more complex because having that balance. So I think there's a lot of conversations happening now about how can organizations make it more inclusive for women with young children, so that they're able to have flexibility in their workplace, so they can still contribute very meaningfully.
For sure.
It needs to improve for sure, I think, in Sri Lanka.
I agree. I think that point is very valid about when women do have children, and that responsibility is sometimes very difficult to manage. We have an example actually in one of our factories where we work on a program called Fair Trade, which is it's kind of like people know it for the coffee and the bananas, but it applies to the apparel industry. We have a customer of ours, I can mention it, Patagonia, who's an amazing brand, and they support this program where they pay extra for the product. They pay a percentage higher than what they pay us, and that goes to a separate account, which is then managed by the workforce of that factory, and they get to decide at the end of each year or each season how to spend that money to better their livelihood. And one program that came out was we built a children's care center right next to the factory. And that allowed all levels of employees to use. And in fact, we have female leadership positions coming out of that, because you have the safety net of knowing that, okay, you have the ability to allow your children to be here and be safe next to you while you're working next door. So
if I can share an example of the same thing, we did this program. We partnered with the IFC, and we termed it Sinhasin Jamaga, where our objective really was to have more female participation in retail, as in general retail, and also introduce them to digitalization. And as it happened, the timing was such that it actually was launched right in the middle of COVID, which was really challenging. So a lot of our programs were actually online.
Right.
But the participation we had was just unbelievable. And I think the program ran for a couple of years, but we had like over 300% female participation in retail, which means, retail shops, which are generally father and son. You now saw wives, sisters, daughters getting involved. And we kept the program going even because we see such an impact. Our distribution heads and even leaders in trade, people who own large shops, small shops, come to us and say, those educational programs we had were life transforming. And I'm so happy that we've been able to make an impact in a very, very traditional space, just completely male dominated.
Yeah.
And very spread out. This is not only urban, but there's Pan Sri Lanka. So I think when you have and we put an effort into something, I think outcomes can be changed.
Yeah, for sure.
In your experience, what forms of unconscious bias most persist in hiring, promotion, and hiring and promotion processes?
Yeah, I've heard the term unconscious bias before. I think it definitely exists. I think, again, we see it more so in our production side of our business, where we're an old company, we have old traditions that have followed old processes, and it's people who fit into those old antiquated systems sometimes that get the benefits of it. When we, in the front end of the company, are trying to change some of those old processes and systems, and then the people we want to be promoted or to recruit don't fit in the culture that we have. So I think that's the most prevalent area I see it. Sometimes an old boys club or something like that we've heard examples of. It's difficult to change because sometimes if the factory is performing well and the productivity is good and you're making a profit, sometimes it's very difficult to challenge that. But when you have an overall strategy, you need to take those tough decisions.
Excuse me. This happened a few years ago, but talking about Old Boys Club, I was representing somebody else in a board meeting, and some of the others had not met me. So I was sitting, I was there early, and one of the members breezed in and said, "Oh, we've got a new secretary today."
Wow.
So unconscious
Really?
biases are always there, but it's not even on gender-based. I think everybody has unconscious biases. I mean, we look at a person and that's first impression, whether it's the way they're dressed or the way they walk, or we don't know what triggers an unconscious bias.
Yeah.
And I think that exists everywhere, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I suppose we could, for us, what we try to do when we are hiring, and for promotions as well, we have a similar process. We try and broad-base the interviews with as much diversity. So we have a series of interviews when we are selecting candidates, and we make sure the panel is very diverse. So that's
Right.
one way we try and
that's a good
knock
one.
out biases,
The people who
yeah.
are doing the interviewing. And I think something else that I can add, we also do kind of aptitude tests for key positions that we're interviewing. So sometimes we'll ask people to review those without really knowing the candidate. So you get a better, unbiased view before you meet the person. So there are methods like that do help. Yeah. Okay. How can leaders bring older generations along in the journey of inclusion without alienating them?
I think the word inclusion is very apparent, very relevant, because it's not only going forward. It's at every spectrum of the organization. So when you have people who worked in a role for so long, who have so much experience, and who have different life journeys. But then, for example, in our organization now, I was quite surprised, 50% of our workforce is Generation Z.
Wow.
I mean, that's a huge transition you need to manage, because we have people who've worked for 40 years, and then you have these young guys coming in with totally different expectations. And the older generations were on hierarchical establishments, where the younger generation don't. So including both thoughts, I think you need constant engagement, integration. I remember recently telling my team, I think I fall into the older generation now, very much. But I think it doesn't matter what your age is. It's really important that you think Generation Z, because we are an FMCG business. We are giving our consumers what they want, and we have to constantly think about the future. And I think in an organization, it's the same. And then we all need to also adapt, whether older or not.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think in the apparel industry, we're making clothing for the Western markets, and fashion trends change so fast. And Gen Z, the things they choose to wear and buy these days are very different to what we used to make, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. So it's very important for us that our older professionals, who are still very valued employees of the company, get that exposure and are able to understand what the end consumer is still looking for. And so we make it a point to have consistent training, first of all, whether it's visiting to other manufacturing plants overseas, to other industries. And also when we're visiting our customers, sometimes it's not just the sales team that will go. We'll have somebody from a production or operational background to also go and understand what the customer is saying, what the end consumer is buying, see how the product is displayed in the stores. Because when you're just stuck in a factory the whole time, you don't really think about that, right? And when you see how it's being sold and who's buying it, I mean, these days people are buying a lot online also, so you have that access and that exposure. But that allows you to then understand or have innovation in the way you're thinking about how to produce the product as well. So we really value our older generations, and I don't think we have a major problem with them being alienated. It's not such a major issue.
Yeah. I think it's how you approach it, isn't it? And how do you ensure that policies translate into lived experience for diverse employees across all levels of the company? So, I mean, for example, we're about 57 years old. So when we look at our policies, we're in the process, actually. And again, it's a constant process, I think, because the work is never finished. I mean, there's never an end line. But we are updating a lot of our policies to be in line with how we need to work. Even, from starting from financial delegation, which is very hierarchical and still is, but we're giving more inclusion for people have more decision-making ability. So with that, you change, policies are really a way that an organization can be consistent across many companies. But at the end of the day, it has to be relevant to what you need to do. I mean, I don't know if you want to add
I think
to
the
that.
one thing I would say is, I'm not a believer in having a separate inclusion policy, right? I think your business has policies that you follow for hiring, for example. I think that has to be included as part of that business policy, right? You cannot,
Absolutely.
when you have a separate DEI policy, that's when issues come up and you question decisions sometimes. So that's the one thing I would say on
I
policy.
would completely agree with you, because I think inclusion is about looking at everything together.
Yeah.
And making sure was it you or me? I can't remember.
What lessons have you drawn from balancing respect for tradition with the need for cultural change?
What lessons? As I said, we have people who worked for over 40 years in some instances, and then we have this young inflow of, very demanding Gen Zs. I look back at myself. I've had a very non-traditional upbringing in the sense from a very young age. We had education out of Sri Lanka. So we were exposed to multicultural thinking. And I think that's what I like to see in our organization too. I think you need to expose people to different things. And just because something is old doesn't mean it's not good. There are lots of things that are traditional, which have very strong values attached to it. And I think it's good to nurture those, but at the same time, we live in a modern world. So we need to, and I think more and more in our society even, you see this happening, merging more and more. It's not one is better than the other, but it's again, we're being inclusive to different thought processes, and at the same time, driving a business in a very modern world.
Yeah, I think we have multiple examples of having the need for cultural change, either through senior leadership change in the company, where someone is trying to bring a new culture, or we've had companies we've merged in the past and then trying to bring two cultures together. And I think the one lesson I've learned is that you can't bulldoze it. Traditions are there for a reason, and changing a culture is a journey. And it's definitely one of the hardest things to do in business. And I think you really have to have a much bigger thinking and a long drawn out plan if you really want to successfully change a culture while maintaining some of the good traditions that you mentioned that the company doesn't want to lose, or you're gonna face operational issues if you try to do that.
Because at the end of the day, I think the inherent values of an organization and the way you do things, I mean, whether you want to call it traditional or cultural or whatever, these are terminologies.
Yeah.
That's what your organization is about. I mean, no two organizations are the same.
Yeah, exactly.
So you need to build your environment, which is going to be progressive for you to go forward, right? I mean, at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think it's you.
I said me?
Yeah.
I lose track of this. What role can a non-linear or unconventional thinkers play in reshaping legacy industries?
Yeah, I think this is crucial for our industry. The apparel industry hasn't really changed much if you think about it in the last 40 or 50 years. The setup of factories, the way the garments are produced, the different divisions in the companies, they've been pretty much the same. When you look at other industries, the way they've been revolutionized. I think we're always looking for new innovation and new ways of thinking, and to have non-linear or unconventional thinkers is a huge advantage. And we've looked at smaller ideas like having a traditional sales and marketing person move to run a factory, or vice versa, have an operations person move into sales, and we've seen a lot of interesting benefits from that. We've hired from other industries to come in, people who've had no background in apparel. I mean, it's not a difficult industry to learn. It's definitely not rocket science. So, we feel people with certain other backgrounds from other industries have had success as well. So, something we're always thinking about, non-linear.
So, I mean, recently I was on a judging panel for startups. And when you meet these young people who are so vibrant with ideas and they have such a lot of passion, I think it's really important. I mean, not everyone has the ability to engage with people like this, And I think as an organization, just talking to my HR head, is we need to expose people, more traditionally hierarchical, older organizations need to understand what young startups are doing, and vice versa, because a lot of startups fail because they don't have structure.
Right.
And I think that those conversations, exposing people to ideas, at the end of the day, that's what it is, isn't it? You see different things, you absorb some, you don't, and what fits to your business. But it's really important that you know different things and you're exposed to different things all the time.
Yeah.
So that you're challenged, that everyone's beliefs are challenged.
For sure, 100% agree. Yeah. Well, I guess it's related. Have you seen examples where a non-traditional perspective led to meaningful cultural or business breakthroughs?
Gosh, I don't know. But one thing that stems to mind, I can talk about my friend. We were in college together. He started an IT business here called WSO2. And he always said he wanted headquartered in Sri Lanka. And everybody in the US, he was living in the US when he had this idea, said you can never start an IT company and be successful and raise money if you're headquartered in Sri Lanka. And I think a lot of people know he just divested the business for $600 million.
Yeah.
So I think at the end of the day, what you need is belief and grit. I mean, offhand, I can't think. I mean, that's what came to my mind when you talk. But I'm sure there are loads of examples.
Is he still living in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, he is very much here.
$600 million richer.
But I mean, even if I take my dad who started this business, he didn't have money, but he put together. He had this idea, and he proposed this high protein biscuit. He gave a proposal to the Ministry of Education to replace high protein biscuits instead of giving a glass of milk and a bun, which was happening under care business.
Yeah.
And that was how he was able to start this business. So I think entrepreneurs with ideas and grit will always, overcome this.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have examples at a smaller level. I mean, just of, I think of difficult customers we've had to work with, and sometimes, for us, in fact, sometimes the more difficult the customer, we see it as an opportunity because it's more difficult for other people to work with them also. So if we can crack that, it kind of is an advantage for us as a group. So we take on those challenges, and I'll give an example of one particular customer. We realized that the people, the key contact points were very aggressive to all the males who were communicating with them. And whenever it was a female writing to them, they were responding much nicer. So we changed the team a little bit and put a female to be the leader. And it was a huge success. They built a great relationship, and we have a great business with them. So just small ideas where we changed traditional ways and kind of worked well for us. So yeah.
What advice would you offer to peers leading companies with long histories or initiating meaningful cultural shifts?
Well, I would say I empathize with you. I know the challenges. I think, as I said earlier today, definitely you can't be bulldozing anything. You need to be patient. Sometimes a skill that I lack, but it's a journey, and you need to understand, first of all, what is the existing culture of your company, right? If you can try and diagnose or establish what is that culture and how does the company work with its people, and then identify where you want to be. Maybe look at another company you've seen globally and understand their culture and say, okay, this is what I want our company to be like, and these are the employees I want to have and how I want people to interact. And then you got to map out a plan. And I look at recently in our company, we recently just created our purpose statement, our first purpose statement, and it was very challenging to get. First of all, we asked everyone, what is a purpose statement? Like, what does it mean for a company to have a purpose statement? So then they said, okay, it's the company's purpose. And everybody's first answer, obviously, is we're here to make a living, to make money. So it takes time to get that thinking to be a bit bigger and to understand, that sometimes thinking differently can help you achieve your goals in a better way. So yeah, those would be my key advice points.
So I would add to that. This is not a single person's journey. One person can't initiate this. So it's very important to get buy-in from starting from the board to your peers, that people sit on the same page. I think that's a start when you're trying to do transformation, because you don't want anyone derailing it, and then working forward. And it's never a straight journey. There are so many bumps along the way. So you need to believe in what you're doing, because you need to have resilience to stay on the course if it's meaningful. Yeah, you must let your passion drive you to what you need to do.
Well, thank you very much, Shea, for joining me. I think it was a very insightful conversation. Interesting to learn more about you and your company. And I hope we can keep in touch and share the learnings going forward.
It was great, Sid. Great meeting you after ages. Enjoyed this. Thank you.